Hello, and welcome to Soothing Pod's Sleep Stories. My name is Arif, and tonight I will be your guide as we embark on a peaceful journey of art, of music, and of love, as we learn about the lives and powers of the 9 Greek Muses who inspired artists, poets, musicians, and even gods. We will hear about the lives of Calliope, the muse of eloquence and epic poetry, of Clio, the muse of history, of Erato, the muse of lyric and love poetry, of Euterpe, the muse of music, of Melpomene, the muse of tragedy, of Polyhymnia, the muse of sacred poetry and hymns, of Terpsichore, the muse of dance, of Thalia, the muse of comedy, and of Urania, the muse of astronomy. Before we begin, however, let us take a moment to unwind and find peace and comfort in the place that we are in, here and now. Close your eyes and allow your body to sink into the mattress beneath you. Here and now, there are no responsibilities. There is no to-do list. You are free to just lie in bed and let your mind wander without obstructions. There is nothing else you are meant to be doing or supposed to be doing at this moment. By simply closing your eyes and joining me on this journey, you are already slowly relaxing and starting to rest. With every breath you take in and every bit more comfort you feel, you are giving your body nourishment. Anything else you seek will come in time, but for now, find comfort in the tranquil journey you are about to embark on. With your eyes closed and your body sinking deeper into the mattress beneath you, I'd like you to join me in imagining something. For a moment, I'd like you to imagine that you are still in your soft, plush bed, but your bed is no longer in your room. Instead, your bed is neatly and safely laid in the center of a beautiful clearing in a lush, stunning forest. To the right of you, a small vernal pool glistens in the light of the silvery moon that is full, bright, and dreamy overhead. In fact, the moon is so close, so stunning, that it feels if you could reach out and brush your fingers over the surface of it, as if you could feel each crevasse and each mountain that is peppering its celestial surface. The ephemeral pool beside you is created by rainfall. The grass around the edge of the pool sways and dances in the gentle breeze, blowing through this peaceful clearing, and dozens of specific plants and animals have made their cozy home along the edges of this water. In fact, you can hear some of the animals now. At the edge of the pool, floating on a vibrant green lily pad, a frog croaks into the night air. It's a tiny little emerald frog, so tiny that it's hard to believe it can make such a permeating melody. You see it as its little cheeks inflate, and then it lets out the breath, much like the deep inhales and exhales that you are making at the moment. But the frog is not alone in its quest to sing its song to the universe. All around you, crickets chirp, creating a pleasant soundscape that you feel almost entirely immersed in. Their bright chirps glide through the chilly night air with ease, echoing off the ancient bark of the trees and sailing toward the tall mountains in the distance. Overhead, an owl hoots into the sea of inky black sky above it. It takes long pauses in between the calls, pausing to wait for a response. It drinks in the brisk air just before it calls out, propelling its deep, earthy call out to anyone who will listen. And around everything, encompassing all of the animals, the earth is singing alongside them. The leaves of the tree the owl is tucked into rustle and sway. Below, the soft evergreen grass dances against one another, the steady whoosh, whoosh of their rhythm beating like a drum. As you listen to all these sounds, taking them in deeply and fully, something magical begins to happen around you. You cannot just hear them, but you can see them. The sway, sway, whoosh of the grass drifts up into the air around you like plumes of smoke, with a stunning golden aura that makes the clearing glow. The hoot of the owl drifts out of their beak in notes you can physically see, notes that are a deep sapphire, notes that move slowly and intentionally, just like the owl's song. All around you, the chirp of the crickets pop into the air like bubbles being blown. They are a mix of orange and pink, a bright, cheery mix that beautifully balances the swaying of the grass and the hoot of the owl overhead. The frog in the pond lets out a long, smooth green note that's as brightly colored as it is. You watch the note slide through the air, steady and slow, shrinking smaller and smaller as it glides along towards the trees. For quite some time, you watch this beautiful display around you. This beautiful display of the music of the earth. The soundscape that is being created just for you by the world's most breathtaking orchestra. You watch the yellow mist of the swaying grass and trees overhead, the pinks and oranges of the crickets, the green of the frogs croak, and the calming blue of the owl. With each passing moment, you find yourself closer and closer to pure serenity. Now that we have taken the time to relax and find peace and comfort where we are here and now, let us begin our story. There are many stories of how the Muses came to be. They are such a central figure and so important to so many Greek myths that poets, writers, and historians have spent hundreds and hundreds of years weaving tales about these influential and powerful women. One of their origin stories, and one that reflects the beauty of their nature, begins deep within the wilderness surrounding Mount Helicon, a lush and beautiful mountain close to the north coast of the Gulf of Corinth. To this day, Mount Helicon rises from the rolling hills of the Greek countryside as a mystery, as a spot of wonder that ignites the imagination and passion within anyone who lays eyes on it. The soft green hills carved in the countryside around the mountain look as though they are waves plucked out of the ocean, curving up and down into one as far as the eye can see. They give way to the mountain of Helicon, a mountain that rises into a soft, domed point, a green point that seems to glow against the cornflower blue skies during summertime. It is here, in these wild and lush woods, that 4 springs came to be. First, Pegasus, a beautiful, white-winged horse, was gliding through the beautiful blue skies one day. The divine horse descended into the forest, and as he did, his hooves landed on the ground with some force. The earth cracked below him, and with that crack, an ethereal gold light sprung from the soil itself. The cracks extended across the ground, gliding through it like birds through the air, and slowly, water began to bubble up into these cracks. The fresh water was some of the clearest anyone had ever seen. It seemed to glow even in the light of the sun, radiating a soft blue aura that told passers-by just a bit about the magic that they contained. Slowly, the cracks extended, forming into 4 springs, one for each of Pegasus's hooves. At once, the springs appeared as if they were as ancient as the trees around them. Lily pads bubbled up to the surface, bobbing on them and inviting frogs to cozy upon them. Plants spread across the edges of the water, providing safe homes and places to drink for the animals of the forest. A waterfall even began to cascade from the cliffside around one of the springs, pouring sparkling blue water into it at a slow, steady pace. Pegasus approached the water, gazing down into it with a perplexed expression. As he went to take a long sip of the cool water, however, his confusion grew even more. A woman rose from beneath the water, a woman who radiated an ethereal energy that Pegasus had only witnessed before with the gods. The woman stepped onto the lush grass around the spring with a smile on her face. In her arms, she held a writing tablet, a stylus, and a beautiful strung lyre with intricate, breathtaking carvings on it. This was Calliope, the muse of epic poetry. Behind her, the next nymph stepped out of the water. In her arms, she carried a pile of books and scrolls. She did not gaze at this new world in awe. Rather, she was already mesmerized by the books and scrolls she had. She gazed over them in wonder, soaking in every word with a bright smile on her face. In her other hand, she held a cornet, a woodwind instrument. This was Clio, the muse of history. Clio gazed back at the spring with a smile, encouraging the next muse to emerge from the waves. Erato rose from the water with passion and excitement in her eyes. She had a dreamy, soft look as she glanced over the stunning world around her. The sun rays glistening in the leaves sparked inspiration within her, but not nearly as much as the two birds cuddled up in a nest above the spring. When Erato spotted them, she strummed her cithara with her delicate fingers. As the muse of love poetry, she was already composing something in her head at the sight of the two lovebirds. Behind Erato, Euterpe seemed to rise as she climbed out of the spring. She was the first to pause and close her eyes, taking a long, peaceful listen to the sound of the new world they found themselves in. She smiled at the melodies of the birds and the rhythm of the wind blowing across the spring, of the breeze dancing in the grass. It did not take long before she began to hum to herself, filling the clearing with the very first song of her creation. She carried an aulos in her hand, an instrument much like a flute. With her other hand, she lifted panpipes to her lips, playing a little song for everyone in the clearing to enjoy. As the muse of music, song, and lyric poetry, she was already making her mark on the world. Next came Melpomene. She didn't rise from the spring with the same force as the other muses. Rather, she climbed out slowly, taking her time to establish herself in this strange and wonderful new world. She took in the sights around her with a level of depth and contemplation that her siblings did not. And, unlike the other muses, she did not carry an instrument with her. Instead, she held a magic mask in one hand and a sword in the other. A pair of heavy boots shielded her feet from the soft grass. As the muse of tragedy, she was already exploring the world around her, already coming to terms with the reality of beauty. Behind her, Polyhymnia was the next to ascend from the spring. A golden glow seemed to engulf Polyhymnia as she floated out of the water, with droplets rolling off her and cascading back into the spring below. She had no instrument in her hands, and her face was shrouded by a thin veil. The white gossamer shielded her from everyone else, and yet she had a warm smile on her face as she took in this world that she was entirely grateful to be a part of. In one hand, a bunch of fresh, ripe grapes dangled from her fingertips. Not only was Polyhymnia the muse of hymns and sacred poetry, but to some, she was regarded as an agricultural goddess. Behind Polyhymnia, it was Terpsichore who sprung from the spring with the most energy of all. Her body moved in a breathtaking rhythm as she glided out of the waves, moving effortlessly, much like the water itself. The minute her nimble feet touched the soft ground, she found herself moving to the rhythm that was woven into her spirit. She strummed her lyre with the plectrum made of glistening mother of pearl. With every strum of her lyre, her body moved in perfect unison. The other muses clapped and admired her for the beautiful dancer that she already was as the muse of dance. It was Thalia that rose from the spring next, and she rose from the spring with a warm smile on her face. From the moment she came into being, she radiated a joyful, comforting energy that was completely incomparable to anyone else's. In her presence, the other muses instantly felt a wave of peace wash over them. But not just peace, belonging as well. Thalia smiled at each and every one of them, and as she tried to take her final step out of the spring, she found herself tripping on herself and falling into the moss at her feet. Everyone raced to help her, but Thalia was laughing. Her laugh was deep and wonderful, a laugh that made it impossible for anyone around her not to laugh. The other muses joined in, relieved that Thalia was unharmed. In her hands, Thalia carried a comic mask and a shepherd's crook. The 8 muses waited on the shore for the final muse to emerge, and when she did, she wasn't looking at the other muses. Rather, she was already gazing up at the sky. Urania, the muse of astronomy, had her eyes on the cosmic wonder above before she even bothered to look at the world around her. In one hand, she held a globe, and in the other, a compass. With everyone assembled, the Muses felt at peace. Though they had just been brought to the earth, they were well aware of why they were here, of the power and ability that they possessed. It didn't take long for the other gods to become aware of their presence, and they were incredibly grateful for their contribution to the world. It is said by some that Zeus and Mnemosyne, the Titan goddess of memory, were the parents of the Muses. Whether that was by traditional methods or brought forth by the Pegasus forming their springs from the earth, we may never know. But one thing is for sure: Mnemosyne's powers were passed on to the Muses. The Muses' role in the world was to kindle creativity and provide inspiration for artists, musicians, poets, writers all around the world. And in their creation, they would use the knowledge gathered from the world from ancient times and kept by Mnemosyne, the goddess of memory. During their creation of art or interpretation of history and astronomy, they would rely on the vast creativity and understanding of the world that might have otherwise been forgotten. And it was the Muses' desire to help everyone tap into this endless garden of insight. Soon, Apollo visited the Muses, one of the sons of Zeus. Apollo was one of the highest Olympian gods, and his skills were known to everyone around the world. Not only did he ride on a chariot around the earth, bringing light to everyone, but he was a god of music and the arts as well. When he heard of the Muses' creations, he was relieved. The arts were as godly as the gods themselves, and humanity deserved to experience them and appreciate them in full. However, without inspiration, without the Muses, humans had trouble accessing that kind of magic and having the beautiful experience of creation. When the Muses laid eyes on Apollo, several of them were smitten by him. However, there was more to it than that. They could feel the artistic passion radiating from inside Apollo. They could see his love of the arts. They could see his desire to pass that on and share it with the world around him. And because of that, the Muses instantly loved him. Though the Muses sprung from the spring with immense skills already, it was Apollo who decided to help them fine-tune their abilities. Rather than bring them up to Mount Olympus, where the influence of the other gods would surely rub off on them, Apollo decided instead to visit the Muses every day and help them refine their skills so that they could help humans and gods alike perfect their own. For several days, Apollo would arrive at the springs of the Muses just as his rays of sunlight did. The Muses would awaken from their springs in the golden glow of the rising sun, soaking it in with peaceful, serene smiles on their faces. They loved watching the way the sun painted the landscape with different mosaics of color, with vibrant pinks, soft lilacs, deep reds, and glowing oranges. It was like watching a painting in motion, and it was from this that the Muses received some inspiration of their own. They saw that this world provided endless potential for creation. They would listen to the sounds of the forest, the sounds of nature awakening and shaking off the shadows of night. Overhead, birds flitted from branch to branch, singing their beautiful morning melody into the bright, sunny air. The Muses found themselves watching the birds for quite some time, mimicking their calls and watching their dreamy, smooth flight patterns through the trees in the thick, wonderful forest. Just as they had finished observing the birds and the beauty of the sunrise, Apollo would arrive without fail. He spent each day with a different muse, working with them to try and perfect their craft. As a rather smug and confident god, Apollo had assumed this would take some time. But he was surprised to find that within just a few hours, each of the Muses were more skilled than he himself was. He sat by the edge of the water with Calliope. She dangled her bare feet into the spring, twirling them across the surface gently to watch the rings and patterns her touch left behind on the calm water. In her hands, she held her lyre, her instrument that had already become near and dear to her heart. Apollo asked for her to strum the instrument and play from her heart. He expected it to take some time for her to play, but as she began to strum, the music flowed from her. But it wasn't music like the music that Euterpe, the muse of music, would play. It was music to accompany a poem. Calliope sang her smooth, beautiful words into the air. Her poem was so breathtaking that Apollo was nearly brought to tears. He watched her with wide, emotional eyes, amazed that someone could create something of such depth and beauty. They spoke of poetry all day long, well until the sun set. And when it did, Apollo bid the Muses farewell. In his heart, he knew the Muses were going to change the world forever. And he knew now, without much of his help at all, they were ready to do just that. He told the Muses that when the time was right, they would know what to do and where to go. He promised that their service to the world would be worth it, that they were more valuable than they could possibly realize. It was the next morning when the Muses realized the true importance of their role in the world. Just as the sun began to rise over the beautiful springs, casting the Muses in the glow of that yellow light, a few of them felt a divine heave inside them. They rose to their feet, floating as the feeling of warmth and necessity washed over them like a wave. Terpsichore, Calliope, and Erato were called into the world, and they moved towards their calling with a dreamy look in their eyes. Terpsichore glided across the landscape with her heart full and her whole being glowing with confidence. Her head was held high with pride as she made her way to a small yard on the outskirts of a city, a yard where a young girl was dancing by herself. There were tears in her eyes. Terpsichore could tell she had just been in a fight with her parents, that she was wounded and feeling vulnerable. She sat beside the girl and whispered to her, encouraging her to let go of pain, reminding her that it wasn't hers to carry, and that she could feel joy again. Slowly, the young girl began to dance. With every elegant move her body made to the music of nature around her, the tears lessened. Her gloomy, wounded expression was replaced by a bright, glowing smile. She was lost in the music inside herself, lost in the movements of her dancing and the freedom it provided her with. Terpsichore smiled to herself. A warm feeling coursed through her body as she gazed at the young girl, knowing that she had helped her find the art, and the art had helped her heal. Meanwhile, Calliope found herself swaying outside the window of a young woman. Her kids ran and played out in the yard, and the woman watched them with a sense of longing and nostalgia. She seemed run down, tired, and in that, Calliope knew she needed to find peace. Calliope whispered in the woman's ear and nudged her ink toward her. Slowly, the woman began to write on her paper. At first, her fingers were hesitant, unsure, but soon they were flowing effortlessly. The words poured out of her as she put her thoughts on paper, words describing extraordinary deeds of extraordinary characters, and as she put them on paper, her shoulders dropped with relaxation. All the tension melted out of her body. Calliope could see that this release, this poem, had given her exactly what she needed. On the other side of town, deep within the city, Erato stood by the bedside of a man struggling with grief. He missed his wife greatly, and as such, was struggling to get out of bed. Erato held his hand and whispered to him, passing on hopeful messages and inspiration as she spoke of love. The man slowly stood up, feeling inspired, and began to write a poem to his lost love. With every word, his eyes filled with tears, not tears of pain, but tears of relief. He had found comfort in writing to her. The Muses returned to the spring. As they did, the importance of their roles in the world became clear to them. To this day, the Muses still visit us, filling us with inspiration and reminding us of the importance of creating. Whenever we are struggling, we can choose to remember that they are by our side, encouraging us and helping us let go. I hope you have enjoyed this sleep story and it has brought you a night of peaceful, restful sleep. Please join me again tomorrow for another sleep story. Until then, sweet dreams.